Namaskar, Om Shakti Hrim, Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayana. The Shiva Purana Part 2. The fifth of the Jyotirlingas is a Kedara. Is one of Vishnu's incarnations. He revealed himself as the two sages, Nara and Narayana. These two sages prayed for a long time in the hermitage known as Vadrika Ashram. Near the hermitage there was a peak of the Himalayas named Kedara. After the two sages had prayed to Shiva for a very long time, Shiva appeared and said, "I don't understand why the two of you are worshipping me. It is you who should be worshipped. But since you have been praying to me, let me grant you boon." Nara and Narayana decided that Shiva should always be present in the form of a linga on the peak of Kedara. The sixth of Jyotirlingas is Bhima Shankara. You know about Rama and Ravana from the Ramayana, and you also know that Rama killed not only Ravana but also his brothers Kumbhakarna. A Rakshasa woman named Karkati used to live on the mountains named Sahya. Karkati had been married to Kumbhakarna and her son was named Bhima. One day Bhima asked Karkati, "Mother, whose son I am? Why do we live alone in this forest?" Karkati said, "Let me tell you my sad story. I used to be married to the Rakshasa Viratha, but Rama killed Viratha. Later on, Kumbhakarna came and married me here and you were born. Kumbhakarna had promised to take me to Lanka, but he was killed by Rama and I never got to see Lanka. That is the reason we live here alone. We have nowhere else to go." Bhima was very sorry to hear this story. He resolved to avenge himself on Vishnu because he knew that Rama had been an incarnation of Vishnu. For 1,000 years he prayed to Brahma with his hands raised up to the sky. When Brahma appeared, Bhima wished for the boon that he might become very strong. This boon Brahma granted. The first target of Bhima's attention was the king of Kamarupa. The king's crime was that he was devoted to Vishnu. Bhima attacked the king, stole all his belongings, conquered his kingdom and imprisoned him and his wife. He then proceeded to conquer the rest of the world. In the prison the king and his wife started to pray to Shiva. This news was brought to Bhima by Rakshasa gods and Bhima decided to kill the king. He found the king praying before Shiva Linga. When Bhima raised his sword to cut off the king's head, Shiva appeared from the linga and repelled the sword with his trident. Bhima flung a spear at Shiva, but thus too was driven back by the trident. Whatever weapon was used by Bhima, Shiva's trident destroyed them all. Finally Shiva killed Bhima and all his Rakshasa cohorts. The gods were gratified and they craved that Shiva might always remain in the place in the form of the linga. The seventh of the Jyotirlinga is named Vishwanatha. It is located in the city of Varanasi or Kashi. Varanasi is a very sacred place. Brahma himself performed difficult tapasya there. So difficult was the tapasya that Vishnu shook his head in the disbelief. When Vishnu shook his head, a jewel fell off from Vishnu's ear Karna. The place where the jewel fell is known as Manikarnika, and it is famous Tirtha. Varanasi is not destroyed when the rest of the world is destroyed. Shiva himself raises it on the point of his trident and protects it while destruction rages all around. When the world is recreated, Shiva replaces Varanasi to its appointed place. Shiva and Parvati once went to visit Brahma. Brahma began to chant hymns in Shiva's praise with all of his five mouths. One of the mouths, however, made mistakes in pronunciation of the hymns. This angered Shiva, and Shiva severed the offending head with a gaze of his third eye. But this effectively amounted to the killing of a Brahmana, and Shiva committed a crime. The severed head therefore got stuck to Shiva's back and would not come off, no matter where Shiva went. But when Shiva arrived in Varanasi, the head fell off his back. Shiva realized that Varanasi was a special place, and he resolved that he would always be present there. Towards the south of the country there was a mountain named Brahma Parvata. There the sage Gautama and his wife Ahalya performed tapasya for 10,000 years. While they were meditating, there were no rains in the forest for 100 years, and there was a shortage of water. Living beings died from the drought. Gautama prayed to Varuna, the god of the ocean and the rain. Varuna appeared and offered to grant a boon. "Please grant the boon that it might rain," said Gautama. "I can do that," replied Varuna. "That is beyond my powers. Ask for something else instead." "Then let us have a pond in the forest that will always be full of water," said Gautama. This was within Varuna's powers, and the pond was created. The other sages also began to use water from this pond. Normally Gautama sent his disciple to fetch water, but the disciples complained that his wife of the other sages did not let them take the water. So Ahalya herself started to fetch the water. The wives of the other sages annoyed and pestered Ahalya, but she never reacted. These wives, they complained to their husband about Ahalya and Gautama. At first the sages did not listen, but eventually they were convinced that Ahalya and Gautama were wicked. They therefore sought to devise a plan so that these two might be punished. They began to pray to Ganesha. When Ganesha arrived, the sages said, "Please grant us the boon that Gautama and Ahalya might be banished from the hermitage." Also, Ganesha realized that this was an unfair boon. He decided to grant it because he realized that the sages and their other wives needed to be punished. Gautama had some fields of paddy and grain. Ganesha adopted the form of a lean and starving cow and began to eat up the crop. Gautama tried to drive away the cow with a blade of grass. But as soon as he struck the cow with the blade of grass, the cow fell down and died. This was a terrible calamity. It was the killing of a cow. The other sages banished Gautama and Ahalya from hermitage. They had to set up an ashrama that was a fair distance away. The other sages completely disassociated themselves from Gautama and Ahalya. Gautama began to think of ways of performing prayashchitta, penance, for the crime that he had committed. The other sages told him that he would first have to travel around the world. After that he would have to pray very hard for an entire month. The next task was to circle Brahma Parvata 100 times and bathe in the 100 pots of water. This would complete the penance. All the Gautama and Ahalya did. They also prayed for a long time to Shiva. Shiva appeared before them and offered them a boon. Gautama desired the boon that the river Ganga might always be present in the hermitage. Ganga said that she would agree subject to the condition that Shiva and Parvati were also always present and in the hermitage. Parvati and Shiva agreed to do this. This established Triambaka, the eighth of the Jyotirlingas. The rivers Ganga which flower where there came to be known as the Godavari. So Triambaka is the one banks of the Godavari. What happened to the evil sages and their wives? Gautama asked that they might be pardoned. They performed penance by circling Brahma Parvata 101 times and begged forgiveness from Gautama and Ahalya. The names of the Jyotirlingas is named Adinatha. Ravana, the king of the Rakshasas, meditated in the Himalayas so as to please Shiva. First he prayed on Mount Kailasa, but Shiva did not appear. He then went to a place named Vrikshakhandaka, which was a little towards the south. He prayed there, but Shiva did not appear. Ravana next dug a pit in the earth and started to pray inside the pit. He established a Shiva linga inside the pit. Shiva still did not appear. Ravana therefore decided that he would immolate himself. Ravana, as you know, had 10 heads. He lit a fire and, severing his heads, began to offer them one by one to the fire. When 9 of the heads had thus been offered, Shiva appeared. "Enough is enough," said Shiva. "What boon do you want?" "Please grant me the boon that I may be very strong. And please restore my 9 heads," replied Ravana. This boon Shiva granted, and the place where Ravana prayed is known as Adinatha. The gods were not at all happy that Ravana had become so strong. They were afraid that the Rakshasa might start to oppress them. They therefore sent Narada to create some mischief. Narada met Ravana and asked him why he was looking so happy. Ravana related the story of the boon. "Boon," exclaimed Narada, "who believes in Shiva? Let me see if you can lift up Mount Kailasha. If you can do this, I shall indeed believe that you have become strong." Incited by Narada, Ravana returned to Kailasha and lifted up the mountain. As the mountain shook, Shiva and Parvati were disturbed. Shiva cursed Ravana that soon a being would be born who would kill Ravana. This being was of course Rama, Vishnu's incarnation. The 10th of Jyotirlingas is named Nagesha. There was used to be a Rakshasa named Daruka. His wife was named Daruki. They lived in forest and the banks of the western sea. Parvati had granted Daruki the boon that wherever Daruki went, the forest would follow. Using the forest as the base, Daruka and Daruki began to oppress the world. They destroyed the yajnas and killed all the righteous people. In desperation, the survivors went to a powerful sage named Urva. They told Urva that he alone could save the world from the depredations of these Rakshasas. Urva cursed the Rakshasas that if they committed any violence on earth, they would immediately die. As soon as the gods got to know about this curse, they attacked the Rakshasas. The demons were in a fix. If they did not fight with the gods, they would be slaughtered. But if they fought with the gods, they would die because of Urva's curse. They decided that they would go and live in the ocean. Thanks to the boon that Daruki had received from Parvati, the entire forest was also submerged in the ocean and became the home of the Rakshasas. The Rakshasas lived. They did not return to earth, but they imprisoned and killed any people who traveled in boats across the ocean. In the fashion they once captured a Vaishyu who was devoted to Shiva. The Vaishyu set up a linga in the prison and began to pray to Shiva. When the Rakshasas saw this, they attacked him with weapons so as to kill him. This Vaishyu was named Supriya. Shiva gave Supriya a Pashupata, a divine weapon associated with Shiva. With this the Vaishyu killed many demons. The remaining Rakshasas were saved by Parvati intervention. The linga that Supriya worshipped is Nagesha. The 11th of the Jyotirlingas is named Rameshwara. Ravana had kidnapped Sita and Rama looked for her everywhere. He was aided in his search by the monkeys. The search brought them to the shores of the ocean. While Rama was trying to decide how to cross the ocean, he felt very thirsty. He therefore asked the monkeys to fetch him some water. But when the water was brought, Rama realized that he should not drink the water without first praying to Shiva. Rama constructed a linga and worshipped it with many fragrant flowers. Such were the powers of Rama's prayers that Shiva, Parvati and their companions appeared before Rama. Shiva blessed Rama and Rama requested him to stay in that place forever. It is a linga on the shores of the ocean that is known as Rameshwaram. The 12th and the last of the Jyotirlingas is named Guhnesha. To the south there is mountain named Deva. A Brahmana named Sudharma used to live there. His wife was called Sudeha. Husband and wife were righteous and regularly prayed to the gods. They had only one reason to complain. They had no son. Sudeha was especially disturbed at this. Other women tended to insult her because she had no son. Sudharma decided to conduct an experiment. He plucked two flowers and offered them in front of sacred fire. He mentally associated one of the flowers with having a son and asked his wife to choose a flower. Unfortunately, his wife chose the flower that was not associated with having a son. From this, Sudharma concluded that they were not going to have a son, and he did the best to console Sudeha. But Sudeha refused to be consoled. She was miserable. "Why don't you marry again?" asked Sudeha. "Perhaps you will then have a son. Marry my niece Ghushna." "No," replied Sudharma. "You love her now because she is your niece. But if she does indeed have a son, you will become jealous and will come to hate her." Sudeha convinced her husband that this would never happen. So Sudharma married Ghushna. Every day Ghushna made 101 lingas out of clay and worshipped them. When the day's prayers were over, she immersed the linga in a pond. When the linga had thus been worshipped, Ghushna gave birth to a handsome boy. Shiva had taken pity on Sudharma and Ghushna. But when the son was born, Sudeha's nature changed, and her husband had warned her. She felt jealous. She thought that Ghushna got more impotence and she was treated like a maid. In the middle of the night, Sudeha slew the boy with a knife and threw the dead body in the pond. This was the pond where the lingas had been immersed. As was her wont, Ghushna got up in the morning and began to worship a linga. Blood was discovered on the bed. The boy could not be found, and everyone raised the alarm. But Ghushna was not distracted by this racket and did not leave her prayers. Shiva was so impressed with Ghushna's devotion that he restored her son back to life. He also wished to kill the evil Sudeha with his trident. But Ghushna begged for her own life and Shiva spared Sudeha. Ghushna's act of forgiveness so impressed Shiva that he wished to grant Ghushna another boon apart from restoring her son. Ghushna decided that Shiva might always be present in a linga near the pond. This is known as Ghuhnesha. Arjuna and Shiva. Duryodhana robbed the Pandavas of their rightful share of the kingdom in a game of dice. As a result of this, the Pandavas had to spend many years in the forest. While they were in the forest, Vedavyasa came to visit the Pandavas. Vedavyasa told them that they should pray to Shiva. But since Arjuna was the best suited among the Pandavas for worshipping Shiva, Vedavyasa taught Arjuna a special mantra, incantation. Then he asked Arjuna to go to Mount Indrakila and pray to Shiva there. Mount Indrakila was on the banks of the river Bhagirathi. Arjuna went to Mount Indrakila. He made a linga out of clay and started to pray to Shiva. The news of Arjuna's wonderful tapasya spread everywhere. Arjuna stood on one leg and continually chanted the mantra that Vedavyasa had taught him. Suddenly Arjuna saw a bow. Arjuna thought that this first bow might have come to distract him from his tapasya. Alternatively, it might be a relative of the several demons that he had killed and therefore might wish him harm. Thinking this, Arjuna picked up his bow and arrow and let fly an arrow at the bow. Meanwhile, Shiva had decided to subject Arjuna to a test, and he had also arrived at the spot disguised as a hunter. When Arjuna shot an arrow at the bow, so did Shiva. Shiva's arrow struck the bow in the hindquarters, and Arjuna's arrow struck the bow in the mouth. The bow fell down dead. A dispute started between Arjuna and the hunter about who had killed the bull. Each claimed it for his own. They began to fight, but whatever weapons were hurled by Shiva were easily repelled by Arjuna. Shiva also repelled all of Arjuna's weapons. When all the weapons were exhausted, the two started to wrestle. After the fight had gone on for a while, Shiva gave up his disguise of a hunter and displayed his true form to Arjuna. Arjuna was ashamed that he had been fighting with the very person to whom he had been praying. "Please forgive me," said Arjuna. "'Tis all right," replied Shiva. "I was just trying to test you. Your weapons have been like offerings to me. You are my devotee. Tell me, what boon do you desire?" Arjuna wanted the boon that he might obtain glory on earth. Shiva gave Arjuna his Pashupata weapon. This was such a divine weapon that its possession made Arjuna invincible. Sudarshana Chakra, a bladed discus, was Vishnu's weapon. Vishnu received this wonderful weapon as a result of Shiva's grace. Many years ago, the demons oppressed the gods, and the gods went to Vishnu for deliverance. Vishnu said that the demons were so powerful that he would first have to worship Shiva if something was to be done about the asuras. Vishnu went to Mount Kailasa and began to pray to Shiva. He chanted many mantras, but there was no sign of Shiva. Shiva has 1,000 names, and Vishnu next started to chant these names. Each day he chanted the 1,000 names and offered 1,000 lotus flowers to Shiva. Shiva decided to test Vishnu. One day he stole a lotus flower from the 1,000 that were to be offered. When Vishnu realized that there was one lotus flower less, he gouged out his own eye and offered it in place of the missing lotus flower. Shiva was now pleased and appeared before Vishnu. He offered to grant Vishnu a boon. "You know that the powerful demons have been oppressing the gods," said Vishnu. "I need a weapon to fight the demons with. Please give me a weapon." Shiva then gave Vishnu the Sudarshana Chakra, and with this weapon Vishnu killed the demon. When the sages heard this story, they said, "Namaharshana, what are these 1,000 names of Shiva that you have mentioned? Relate them to us." 1,000 name of Shiva is a Sudarshana Chakra of Vishnu. You will notice that a few of the names are repeated, so the total number of names do not quite add up to 1,008. Shivaratri Vrata. Shivaratri is a Tithi lunar day on which Brahma and Vishnu had worshipped Shiva. A Vrata is a special religious rite that is performed. A Vrata observed on Shivaratri is particularly important. It brings undying punya. One stays up at night and prays to Linga. One also has to observe a fast. There used to be a hunter named Rurudruha. He was not at all righteous. In fact, he was quite evil and cruel. He killed many deer, and he was also a robber and thief. Naturally, Rurudruha knew nothing about Shivaratri Vrata. But it happened to be Shivaratri when his parents, wife and children felt very hungry. They asked Rurudruha to go and get some meat so that they might eat. The hunter went to the forest to kill deer, but could not find any. It was already evening and no game was to be seen. Rurudruha found a waterhole and decided that he would keep a vigil there. Sooner or later some animal was bound to turn up. He climbed up onto a bilva tree that was by side of the waterhole, and in case he should feel thirsty, he kept a pot full of water next to him. There he waited. Soon a dew turned up to drink water. The hunter picked up his bow and arrow. When he did so, the tree shook and a few bilva leaves fell on a linga that was right under the tree. Bilva leaves are sacred to Shiva. Some water spilled from the pot and also fell on the linga. Rudruha did not, of course, know this, but the dew saw the hunter. "Don't kill me right now," said the dew. "My children and husband are at home. Let me go and beat them for a while. When I return, you are welcome to kill me." The hunter was in no mood to let the dew go. Thus an animal returned to be killed. But the dew took an oath and Rudruha let her go. After a short while, another dew turned up to drink water. The two dews were sisters and both of them were married to the same deer. As before, the tree shook and bilva leaves and some water fell on the linga. The dew saw the hunter and they said, "Wait for some time before you kill me. Let me say goodbye to my husband and children." The hunter was reluctant to let the dew go, but the second dew also took an oath that Shiva would return. So Rudruha decided to wait. After the dew had gone, the deer turned up to the drink water, and when the hunter picked up his bow and arrow, bilva leaves and water again fell on the linga. The deer said, "Hunter, let me go now. I will come back and you can kill me then. I wish to bid adieu to my two wives and children." The deer also took an oath that he would return and Rudruha let him go. After some time had passed, the two dews and the deer came to where Rudruha was. Each said, "Kill me and spare the others. They need to stay alive and to look after the children." The baby deer had also accompanied their parents. They said, "Kill us. We don't wish to stay alive when our parents are gone." The hunter was so surprised at these developments that the tree shook again. Bilva leaves and water fell on the linga. Shiva now took pity on Rudruha and removed all evil thoughts from his mind. The hunter spared the deer. Shiva himself appeared before Rudruha and said, "From now on your name you will be Guha. You will be so blessed that Rama will become your guest." This story demonstrates that even if Shivaratri Vrata is performed unconsciously, great punya is obtained. In the city of Avanti, there used to be a righteous Brahmana. He had two sons, Sunidhi and Vedanidhi. Vedanidhi was wicked. The king of Avanti was so pleased with the Brahmana that he gave him a golden bangle as a present. The Brahmana took it home and gave it to his wife to store safely. That was discovered by Vedanidhi. Vedanidhi stole the ornament and gave it to a dancing girl. It so happened that the king was watching a dance performed by the dancer girl, and he noticed the bangle on the girl's hand. He found out from the girl that the bangle had been given to her by Vedanidhi. He retrieved the bangle and called the Brahmana. "Do you remember the golden bangle that I had given you?" said the king. "Can you please return it to me? I need it." The Brahmana hurried home and asked his wife for the bangle, but it could not be found, and they realized that it was Vedanidhi who had stolen it. Vedanidhi was banished from his parents' house. He wandered around here and there and begged food so that he might eat. One day he did not get any food at all. That day happened to be Shivaratri. But Vedanidhi did not know this. He saw several people going to Shiva's temple with all sorts of offerings, including food in their hands. The evil Brahmana thought that he might be able to steal and eat this food. He followed the devotees to the temple and waited till they should fall asleep. When they did so, Vedanidhi crept up to the place where the offering had been placed. This was right in front of the linga. It was very dark there and Vedanidhi could not see very well. A lamp was burning and the shadow of the lamp fell on the linga. Vedanidhi tore off a piece of clothes from his clothing and stuffed it into the lamp so that it might burn better. The flame rose and the shadow on the linga was removed. But when Vedanidhi was about to steal the food, the devotees awoke. They gave chase to the chief and shoot at him with the arrows. These arrows struck Adinatha and he died. Yama's messengers arrived and wanted to take the evil Brahmana to hell. But Shiva's companions also arrived and they would not permit Adinatha to be taken to hell. The Brahmana had fasted on a Shivaratri day. He had stayed awake at night and he had removed the shadow from the linga. These were acts of the faithful, even if they had been performed unconsciously. Adinatha's sins were all forgiven. Parvati once asked Shiva, "Lord, tell me, why do you wear a crescent moon on your forehead? What is the story behind this?" Shiva told her the story. Early, Parvati had been born as Sati, the daughter of Daksha. As Sati, she had been married to Shiva. Since Daksha insulted her husband Shiva, Sati gave up her life. When Sati died, Shiva no longer found pleasure in anything. He began to live in the forest and started to perform tapasya. Such was the power of the tapasya that any trees of mountains that were near the place where Shiva was meditating used to be burned into ashes. As Shiva moved from the place to place, the ash started to burn and wither away. The gods were greatly alarmed at these developments. They went to Brahma to seek advice as to how the ash might be saved. Brahma said, "Let us take the moon god Chandra with us and make a present of him to Shiva. Chandra's visage is so pleasing that Shiva may feel happy and pacified." The gods placed the Chandra in a pot of Amrita. They also had another pot that was full of poison. With these two pots they went to Shiva and offered him the pots. Brahma said, "The gods have brought you two pots. Please accept them." Shiva first accepted the pot that contained the Amrita. As soon as he did this, the crescent moon came out and got fixed to Shiva's forehead. Next, Shiva accepted the pot of poison and touched it with his middle finger. He touched his throat with his finger and the throat became blue. That is the reason why Shiva is known as Nilakantha, blue of throat. And because the moon is like a crown to Shiva, Shiva is called Chandrasekhara. At the sight of the moon, Shiva was pacified. Parvati said, "I understand about the moon now, but why do you always smear ashes on your body? What is the reason for that?" Shiva told her the story. There used to be Brahmana who was descended from the great sage Phrigu. This Brahmana began a very difficult tapasya. The tremendous heat of the summer made no difference to him. Nor was he disturbed by the dawn power of the monsoon. He was only interested in meditating. When he felt hungry, he used to ask the bears, the deer, the lions and the jackals to fetch him some fruits. The wild beasts had lost all fear of him. They served him instead. Later on, the Brahmana gave up eating fruits also. He ate only green leaves, and because leaves are called Parna, the Brahmana came to be known as Parnada. He performed tapasya for many years. One day, Parnada was cutting some grass and his kiss slipped and sliced off his middle finger. Parnada was amazed to find that no blood issued from the severed joint. Instead, a sap like that which issues from plants came out. Parnada's vanity knew no bounds. He realized that this was due to the fact that he had been living on green leaves for such a long time. Parnada began to jump with delight. Shiva decided that Parnada needed to be taught a lesson. He disguised himself as Brahmana and arrived before Parnada. "Why are you so happy?" asked Shiva. "Can't you see?" replied Parnada. "My tapasya has been so successful that my blood has become like the sap of plants." "The thought of vanity destroys the fruits of all tapasya," said Shiva. "What have you got to be so proud about? Your blood has only turned into the sap of plants. Well, what happens when you burn plants? They become ashes. I myself have performed so much tapasya that my blood has become ashes." Shiva sliced off his middle finger and ashes came out of it. Purana was impressed. He realized that there was nothing that he could be proud about. Here was a far greater hermit than he. He asked Shiva who he was, and Shiva then displayed his true form to Purana. Ever since that day there have always been ashes on Shiva's body. There was a sage named Shiva. He once saw that his ancestors were being tortured in hell. When he tried to find out why this was so, he was told that this was because Shiva did not yet have a son. To obtain a son, Shiva began to pray to Shiva. He prayed for 1,000 years. At the end of the tapasya, Shiva appeared and offered to grant Shiva a boon. Shiva wanted the boon that he might have a virtuous son. A few days later, when Shiva was ploughing the land, he discovered a baby boy on the blade of the plough. The boy was as bright as the sun and the fire. Shiva was frightened and started to run away. But the boy called after him, "Father, stop, father, stop." A voice was then heard from the sky. This voice told Shiva that this was the son he had wanted. Since the son would make everyone happy, he was to be named Nandi. Shiva brought Nandi home to his hermitage. He taught his sons the Vedas, the arts of the medicine and fighting, dancing and singing, and several other sacred tasks. All this Nandi mastered within 15 days. When Nandi was 7 years old, two powerful sages arrived in Shiva's hermitage. Their names were Mitra and Varuna. Shiva worshipped them and presented Nandi before them. The sages blessed Nandi with the words, "Be lenient, be faithful to your teacher." Shiva said, "Sages, why didn't you bless my son with a long life?" "We could not," replied the sages. "Your son is going to die when he is 8 years old. That is written in his stars." Shiva was crestfallen to hear this, but Nandi consoled his father. He promised his father that he would do something so that his fate would have to be rewritten. He would pray to Shiva, and when he met Shiva, he would ask of him a boon. Meeting Shiva, exclaimed Shiva, "I had to meditate for 1,000 years before I could get to meet a Shiva. How do you accept to meet Shiva in the 1 year that is left to you?" "Wait and see, father," replied Nandi. "Shiva is difficult to meet if you only perform tapasya or thirst for knowledge. The secret lies in faith and devotion. I will manage." There is a river named Purana. Nandi entered the river and began underwater prayers to Shiva. His efforts pleased Shiva so much that Shiva appeared before him. "What boon do you want?" asked Shiva. "Please grant me the boon that I may be devoted to you," replied Nandi. "I don't want to be born, become old and die." Shiva granted Nandi the boon that he and his father would get to live in Shiva's residence in Shivaloka. Shiva's companions are known as Ganas. Shiva made Nandi Ganapati, the chief of the Ganas, and retained him as a perpetual companion. Shiva also gave Nandi a wonderful garland of Tuvia. As soon as he put this garland on, Nandi became resplendent with his 3 eyes and 10 hands. The smallest unit of time is Nimesha. This is the amount of time it takes to blink. 15 Nimeshas make 1 Kashtha, and 30 Kasthas are 1 Kala. 30 Kalas make 1 Muhurta, and 30 Muhurtas are 1 day. 30 days are 1 month. Each month is divided into 2 lunar fortnights, Shukla Paksha and Krishna Paksha. 6 months are called an Ayana. There are thus 2 Ayanas in a year. There is 160 human years are equivalent to 1 year for the gods. The lengths of the 4 yugas are defined in terms of years of the gods, not in the terms of human years. Therefore, eras and their names are Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. Satya Yuga lasts for 4,000 divine years, Treta Yuga for 3,000, Dvapara Yuga for 2,000 and Kali Yuga for 1,000. This adds up to 10,000 divine years. The Sankhya's and Sankhya Amshas are the intervening periods between the Yugas, and this adds up to 2,000 divine years. Thus the 4 Yugas taken together last for 12,000 divine years. In a Kalpa circle, each of the 4 Yugas occurs 1,000 times. A Kalpa has 14 Manvantaras. In Manvantara, each of the 4 Yugas thus occurs 71 times. 1 Kalpa corresponds to 1 day for Brahma. 1,000 Kalpas are 1 of Brahma's years, and 8,000 of Brahma's years make 1 of Brahma's Yugas. 1,000 such Yugas make up 1 Savana, and Brahma lives for 3,000 Savanas. This period is known as a Trivrita. During each of Vishnu's days, 1 Brahma is born and dies. And during each of Shiva's days, 1 Vishnu is born and dies. The sages said, Ramaharshana, you have not told us the story of the quarrel between Daksha and Shiva, which led to Sati's death. You have only mentioned it in passing. Tell us the story now. Ramaharshana related the following story. Daksha's daughter Sati was married to Shiva. One day the gods, the demons and the sages went to visit Shiva and Sati in the Himalayas. Daksha accompanied the other gods on this visit. When the gods arrived, Shiva was seated and did not get up. He showed no special honor to Daksha because Daksha happened to be his father-in-law. Daksha interpreted this as a sign of disrespect. He felt insulted. Subsequently, Daksha arranged for a yajna and sent invitation to all his other sons-in-law. And these wives he did not invite Shiva or Sati, but Sati had about the sacrifice and resolved that she would attend it, invitation or not invitation. In a beautiful Vimana, Sati traveled to her father's house. Daksha was not at all pleased to see Sati. In fact, he ignored her completely and devoted all his attention to his other daughters. When Sati wished to know the reason for this, Daksha told her that this was because of her husband, who happened to be a worthless fellow and did not deserve any respect. Hearing this, Sati gave up her life. The mountain Himalaya had prayed that Sati might be born as his daughter. Sati was born as his daughter Parvati and married Shiva again. This story you already know. Several years later, Daksha resolved to hold an Ashwamedha Yajna, horse sacrifice, in the Himalayas. The gods and the sages were all invited to this sacrifice. Also, she was not among the invitees. The sage Daditchi did not like the slight to Shiva, and he boycotted the Yajna in protest. Parvati heard about this sacrifice and she began to incite Shiva to do something. Shiva created a being named Virabhadra. Virabhadra shone with energy. He had thousands of mouths and eyes. His hair glistened like lightning, and his hands were full of all sorts of weapons. When he spoke, it was like a thunder. From his body, Virabhadra created a female demon named Bhadrakali. What are your orders? Asked Virabhadra, and Bhadrakali of Shiva. Go and destroy Daksha Yajna, was the order. To help them in their endeavor, Virabhadra created several other demons from parts of his body. All of them had 1,000 arms and carried weapons. Virabhadra, Bhadrakali and these other demons headed for Daksha's sacrifice. When they got there, they found that the sacrifice had already started and the sacred fire was burning. The sages were reciting hymns and the gods were watching. Musical instruments were being played. Virabhadra roared, and the sound of the roar was so terrible that several of the gods began to run away. The earth shook with the sound of the roar. There were tidal waves in the ocean. Daksha was frightened. But they summoned up courage and asked, "Who are you and why have you come here?" "We are Shiva's servants and we have come to take part in this sacrifice," replied Virabhadra. Virabhadra and the other demons then proceeded to burn down the structure where the sacrifice was being held. They tied up the priest and threw all the offerings away. With their weapons they attacked the gods. Whatever resistance the gods tried to put up was taken care of by Virabhadra's trident and Bhadrakali's spear. The goddess Saraswati lost her nose and the god Agni lost his arms. The sage Khavya had his eyes gouged out and the sage Pusha lost all his teeth. Virabhadra sliced off Daksha's head and gave it to Bhadrakali, who proceeded to kick it around as one kicks a football. Thousands and thousands of gods died and the sacrifice became a battlefield. Vishnu tried to fight it out and he and Virabhadra shoot arrows at each other. But one of the Virabhadra's arrows struck Vishnu on the chest and he fell down unconsciousness. Spurred on by Brahma, the gods began to pray to Shiva. This prayer specified Shiva and he asked Virabhadra and Bhadrakali to refrain from causing any further damage. Brahma asked, "What about the gods who have been killed? Please bring them back to life." Since Shiva's anger had been appeased, he restored life to the dead gods. Those who had lost parts of their anatomy got them back again. But what was to be done about Daksha? His head could not be found. A god's head was therefore stuck on Daksha's body. This restored to life Daksha's begged forgiveness of Shiva. There was two asurs named Shumha and Nishumha. They meditated a lot and pleased Brahma. Brahma thereupon gave them the boon that they could not be killed by males. Having obtained the boon, the two demons started to oppress the world. They drove the gods out of heaven and the gods went to Brahma so that a solution might be found to the problem. Brahma went to Shiva. "You have to help the gods," he told Shiva. "I have given Shumha and Nishumha the boon they cannot be killed by males. Find a way so that a female is born out of Parvati's body. She will kill Shumha and Nishumha." "I will try," replied Shiva. When Shiva next met Parvati, he addressed her as Kali. This angered Parvati, since Kali means black or dark. "Why did you marry me if you thought I was so dark?" she asked Shiva. "Why do you pretend to love me? Cursed is the woman who is not loved by her husband. I am going to perform tapasya so that I may become fair. I am going to pray to Brahma." Parvati went off to meditate. She meditated for many years. There was a tiger which saw Parvati meditating. It was not a good tiger at all, but an evil one. It thought that Parvati would provide a good meal. It sat down in front of Parvati to appreciate for a while the threat that was in store for it. Parvati did not realize that the tiger was planning to eat her. She thought that it had sat down in front of her because it wanted to protect her from other wild beasts. She thought that the tiger was one of her devotees and she therefore entered the tiger's soul. As soon as she did this, all evil thoughts vanished from the tiger's mind. Now it was indeed one of her devotees. Meanwhile, Brahma arrived to find out why Parvati was meditating. Parvati says that she wanted to become Gauri, that is, someone who was fair. She was sick and tired of being addressed as Kali. Brahma granted the boon. Parvati shed off all the dark cells, kosha, from her body and became Gauri. From the cells emerged a dark-hued goddess named Kaushiki. Parvati handed over Kaushiki to Brahma. Endowed with the weapons by Brahma, Kaushiki killed Shumba and Nishumba. Parvati returned to her husband as Gauri. What happened to the tiger? Shiva turned him into a man and he was employed by Nandi as one of Shiva's gods. He was named Samanandi. The sage Vyagrapada had a son named Upamanyu. When he was small, he wanted some milk from his mother, but he was not at all happy with the milk that his mother gave him. He complained that it did not taste like milk at all. Naturally, said his mother, I did not give you milk. How can we afford milk? We are not rich. I powdered some rice and mixed it with water. That is what I gave to you as milk. Unfortunately, you have tasted milk in your uncle's house, and you could make out the difference. Upamanya's mother began to cry, but Upamanyu consoled his mother. Don't cry, please, he said. I will pray to Shiva and get milk for myself. His mother taught him the mantra that was to be used for praying to Shiva. She also taught him another mantra which would summon up a terrible divine weapon named Agora Astra. This was just in case there was any danger. Upamanyu went to the Himalayas and started to meditate. He lived only on air and chanted the incantation that his mother had taught him. He prayed in front of an Essen linga. Demons came to disturb his meditation, but Upamanyu paid no attention to them. Shiva himself was impressed by Upamanyu's difficult tapasya, but he thought that he would test Upamanyu first. He arrived in front of Upamanyu in the disguise of Indra and asked, Upamanyu, what are you doing? I am blessed that the king of the gods has arrived before me, replied Upamanyu. I am praying to Shiva. Shiva, why pray to that useless fellow? Asked Shiva. Upamanyu could not stand this insult to Shiva. He summoned up Agora Astra by means of the mantra and let it loose at the person he thought was Indra. Shiva then manifested himself in his own form, and Agora Astra was repelled by Nandi, who had also turned it up. Shiva himself taught Upamanyu all sorts of sacred knowledge, and arrangements were made so that Upamanyu need never suffer from a lack of milk. Krishna once came to meet the sage Upamanyu, many years after the milk incident. Upamanyu taught Krishna the words of wisdom that he learned from Shiva. He also taught Krishna to pray to Shiva to read his mantra. It was by praying to Shiva that Krishna obtained his son Samba. For 16 months Krishna had to pray before Shiva. Shiva appeared to grant the boon regarding the son. Parvati also granted Krishna several boons. Shiva was once sitting on Mount Mandara. Parvati came out from behind so that Shiva could not see her and covered Shiva's eyes with her two hands. Shiva could not see and everything seemed to be dark to him. Parvati's hands sweated from the exertion and the sweat fell down on the ground. From the sweat a dark and fierce creature was born and started to roll. Parvati said, Shiva, what are you up to? First you cover up my eyes so that I can see. Next you roll so as to frighten me. Not I, replied Parvati. See for yourself. I wonder where this creature has come from. She removed her hands and Shiva saw the being in front of them. It's our son, said Shiva. It was born from your sweat when you covered my eyes. Since it was born when my eyes were in darkness, let it be called Anhaka. Anhaka was born blind, as Shiva was effectively blind when Anhaka was born. There was an asura named Hiranyanetra. Hiranyanetra had no sons. He therefore began to pray to Shiva, so that he might have a son. Shiva told Hiranyanetra that it was impossible for him to have a son. However, if he so desired, he could have the son Anhaka, and bring him up as his own. Hiranyanetra gladly agreed with him. Om Namah Shivaya. Hare Krishna.